Hello everybody, welcome to my spoiler recap and review for Loki episode 3, which is entitled Lamentis. I'm sorry it's a bit later than usual. I had a very busy day yesterday. I was on the road all day going to see F9, which you will see a review for in just a little bit here on the channel. So things stacked up a little bit this week later than I wanted them to be, but I got up this morning, I watched Loki, took my notes, got my screenshots in order, and I'm ready to talk about it. As always, this is a spoiler recap and review, so if you have not seen this week's episode of Loki and you don't want to know what happens, then turn off now, press pause, come back and watch this after you're done, because this is the last point in the video for which there will be no spoilers. As I mentioned, episode 3 of Loki is called Lamentis, but we don't quite start there. We have a little bit of a rewind to last week's action, and we open in what looks like a bar. We have C20, who last week revealed that she had told the variant about the location of the timekeepers and how to get to them. And we also see inside these illusions, Michael, that the variant is able to cache. She convinces C20 that she's one of her friends. But this also has a very earthy feel. It feels like it's on Earth, and it ties into a revelation that comes up later in the episode. But I also love the very disconcerting atmosphere of this illusion, and the fact that it's not seamless, but she's still able to do all of these things. It just kind of underscores what her powers are and how powerful she really is. Right after the title tag, we then pick up right where the action left off last week. We see the TVA headquarters emptying out to deal with this time crisis, which we don't really deal with at all this episode. The TVA itself and Mobius, all of that is sort of sidelined. This is very much about Loki and the variant, but we see the variant enter TVA headquarters having used these branching timelines as a diversion to go into headquarters and get to the timekeepers. And we realize now that that is her mission. Her mission was to extract how to get to the timekeepers and get to them. This is a very fight-heavy show. So our first fight is between the variant and the different TVA guards that are roaming the hallways. Of course, her magic and her powers don't work here, and so it's a lot of hand-to-hand combat. It's a hallway fight. It's an MCU show. Of course, you're going to have a hallway fight somewhere. And there was a point where she grabs one of their little time sticks and jabs the guard with it, and he, disappears the way that we've seen them do to variants before. And the first time I was watching the show, I was kind of like, well, wait a minute. Why would that make the guard disappear? It only works on variants. Then we realize later in the show that all of the TVA people are variants, and then it makes sense. So this is an example of watching a show and having something come up while you're watching that, kind of make an asterisk, but realize that it's not a plot hole. This is actually a subtle setup for what we're going to learn later on in this episode. Maybe this is why Mobius is so obsessed with jet skis. Maybe Mobius grew up in the swinging 90s. We're not going to know for quite some time, but this is a very interesting wrinkle, and I like this setup for later on in the series and this revelation and how the other characters are going to react to it. As we also saw last week, Loki has followed the variant through the door to the TVA, and he is attempting to not so much stop her as make sure that she doesn't get to the timekeepers without him. He gets his daggers back, there's a showdown between them, but before they can really get too deeply into it, they're interrupted by Ravona Renslayer, who's there with her time stick, ready to apprehend or destroy both of them. Loki grabs the Tempad from the variant's belt and shoots them into one of the apocalypses that she's been hiding in, but it turns out he picked the worst possible apocalypse, literally. Loki has zapped them to a moon called Lamentis 1 in 2077. The variant says this is the worst apocalypse of all of the apocalypses on her list. It is a moon that is imminently going to be destroyed by a planet, and now they're in real trouble because the Tempad has run out of juice. These damn futuristic things, they're great until they run out of battery. It's like an iPhone. It's great technology, but it always seems to run out of battery right when you need it. They've got to recharge it somehow, and so now they're on a quest to recharge the one device that can get them off of this moon before it is completely obliterated, by the way, which will completely obliterate them. As they start on this quest for juice, we also learn that the variant has a name, and that name is Sylvie. And from what I've been gathering on social media and people talking about the show, this wasn't a surprise to a lot of folks. First of all, because there were some people internationally that had seen the subtitles for this episode, and the name Sylvie had already been assigned to the variant, but also because this is tied to a character apparently from the comics, and I'm sure all of the other channels that have that deep base of comic lore have already been covering this. But as I've explained when I'm talking about WandaVision especially, I know that knowledge is out there. That's not something that I seek out because I like coming from a base of not knowing who all of these characters are and discovering it in the canon of the show. So I'm not going to go too deep into Sylvie beyond the fact that we know that the variant's name is Sylvie. There are many other comic book ties that supposedly exist out there. I don't even really look at a whole lot of the social media talk about it because, as I've explained, the way that I like to enjoy the show, if I don't know the comic book backstory, I don't really want to delve into it because I want to learn it through the show and enjoy the show that way. So there are many, many ties to Sylvie and Sylvie's past as a comic book character that are out there, and I encourage you to find those channels that do those breakdowns. They do a great job. A lot of times after a season has passed, like I did with WandaVision, I will go back and watch those videos and see what those comic book connections are, but it's not something that I'm going to go too deeply into right now simply because I don't want to go too deeply into it personally as I enjoy the show and how it's going to run its course. Eventually, Loki and Sylvie realize that the only place that has enough power on this dusty moon to charge this TemPad is an evacuation craft called the Ark. It's what has the wealthy survivors, because of course the wealthy are the only people that are loaded onto this thing to get off the moon. This is a doomed craft, but it has enough power to charge the device that can get them off of the moon. So they head toward the Ark, and to get there they have to board a train. I got some real Snowpiercer vibes, especially because of the class commentary that's going on here. Not a lot of commentary, but the fact that only the wealthy are being evacuated. And also these guards on the train, this has to be intentional. It's a bunch of Cobra commanders. I mean, it's obvious. The homage there is so blatant. There are so many influences on the show that have already been very evident, and the 80s G.I. Joe cartoon is an obvious one here for these guards. In order to get onto the train, Loki impersonates one of the guards, takes Sylvie on as his prisoner. It's kind of a lower grade version of Get Help that we saw from Thor Ragnarok, and they are on their way to the Ark. But as you do when you have two characters that need to get to know each other, they're in a situation now on a train where they've got a little bit of downtime, so it's time for some talk, a little bit of conversation, a little bit of character development. And that's actually what I liked about this episode. I liked the fact that we slowed down just a little bit. As far as actual events happening, it did feel like we're getting into the middle of the series, and they had to slow the show down just a little bit. But I liked what they did here because it wasn't just empty action sequence after empty action sequence, even though I felt that there was maybe one too many fight scene in this particular episode. But it didn't feel like filler either, because we got some great interaction between Loki and Sylvie, and we understand these characters a little more. They have a lot to learn about each other. And this scene on the train in particular, they talk about their mothers, and Loki asking if she knows that she's adopted, and she's saying, oh yeah, they told me, did they not tell you? I know that there's again been some speculation that she's not actually a Loki, or they don't really have a shared past, but it seems like they do, at least in the context of this conversation, or at least that she shares some memories with the Loki that we know. And so it was great kind of them going back and forth. She didn't really remember her mother, so Loki talks about Frigga teaching him magic, and you can see the sadness because he also realizes that she's gone. Even outside of his timeline, he's never going to get back to a timeline where he sees his mother again. So Loki still kind of grieving the death of his mother, remembering her fondly. And then we have what's kind of a big reveal as far as actually coming out and confirming something. They're talking about love. Sylvie asks if Loki had a princess or a prince back on Asgard, and he says a bit of both, probably just like you. And this is now canon that we have a Loki in the MCU who is, I don't want to put the label on it, but it would appear bisexual. And this is also a big thing for Disney and a big thing for Marvel in the sense that they have hinted, they've intimated, they've put things in the background, they've done this, they've done that. But here we now have a main character, a title character in a major MCU property that is confirmed to be part of the LGBTQ plus community. And to come right out and say that is a big deal. Obviously, we are still in Pride Month. I've seen a lot of people that are celebrating this openly because they feel seen, they feel recognized. To have a character as high profile as Loki just come flat out and say it like, yeah, I've been with guys and I've been with girls, in a very matter-of-fact way. It's not really a huge deal in the plot of the episode. It's just a fact about himself that he is choosing to share with what he believes is another version of himself, or some sort of version of himself. It is important to take steps forward eventually and to move things out of the background, to move things out of being coded or move things out of being intimated or hinted at, and actually confirm them. And that's what we have here with Loki. It's probably no coincidence that it is in a Marvel TV project. They don't have to worry about selling tickets. They don't have to worry about it being released in China. They have a little bit more freedom as far as what they can actually confirm. So, I'm not ready to just jump up and clap Disney on the back and say like, the way to go, you did it. But it is great that they were at least able to confirm this for Loki on this show, and I hope that it doesn't stop here. I hope you don't just have one conversation where Loki's like, yeah, I do this, and then it's never referenced again. I'm not saying that you have to make an episode exclusively about it, but it's a great start. It's a great first step. There are certainly other characters in the MCU that have been intimated, that have been coded a certain way, Valkyrie being one of them. I hope this is a first step, hopefully, to the MCU saying, like, okay, we have now opened the door. Let's not close that door again. Following this heart-to-heart, Sylvie takes a nap and Loki gets extremely drunk, and Sylvie wakes up to Loki singing an Asgardian song in the bar. He's wearing his variant outfit. He doesn't really care anymore. I like that he channels his brother, or who knows, maybe Thor channels him with the slamming the glass on the ground and saying, another. I guess that's just how you do it in Asgard. But of course this leads to trouble because Loki is putting a huge target on his back. He's noticed. He's definitely not a Cobra Commander guard. Another fight scene ensues that ends with Loki being thrown off the train, Indiana Jones style, Sylvie following him, and now they're right back where they started. They still have to get to the Ark. They don't really have any transportation, but they are running out of time. Luckily, they seem to be somewhat within walking distance, so they begin hiking toward the Ark to get this TemPad recharged, except that the TemPad has now been broken. Loki's toss off the train has broken it, and now they've really got to figure something else out. And as they're walking towards the Ark, they figure out two crucial things. Number one, the idea that they are still in what could be a variant timeline, and so that while in history the Ark never got off of this moon, if they were able to get off of the moon on the Ark and survive, that would create a branching timeline that would lure the TVA to come and get them, and it would get them out of this reality. Otherwise, they're trapped there. That's one important realization. The second important realization, as we mentioned before, is Loki understanding that because Sylvie was able to go into C20's memories, and she said, yeah, she was a person hundreds of years ago on Earth, just like all the other people that I've talked to. Loki realizes that the TVA agents are not creations of the Timekeepers. They're not these beings that exist outside of a timeline. They are former people. They are variants, just like he is, just like Sylvie is, and they don't know. That's going to be a crucial piece of information, and you know Loki. He's an information broker, and you know he's going to store that to be revealed at just the right time. As we get to the end of the episode, Loki and Sylvie make it to the Ark. They're formulating a plan on how to get aboard, how to get it off of this moon and get the TVA to them. When all hell breaks loose, the planet begins exploding and throwing stuff around at them. There's things falling down, things exploding. Another fight breaks out. Things are going nuts. They're trying to get to the Ark in time, but it is far too late. A projectile comes down, it destroys the Ark, and we end on one of the biggest cliffhangers for the show, and the show has tended to end on cliffhangers in these first 3 episodes, but this is a very Saturday morning serial type cliffhanger. The Ark is destroyed, and it seems like they have no way now to get off of this moon because their TemPad is destroyed, the only way off of the moon is destroyed, and as we've established, when you're this close to an apocalypse, the TVA is not able to detect changes in the timeline, so it doesn't seem like the TVA is going to have any way to find out where they are. So we've left them in a bit of a pickle. I'm sure this is going to be resolved probably early in next week's episode because that's what happens with a lot of cliffhangers, for better or for worse. But I like the fact that you're leaving people with a little something to look forward to for next week. Like I said, this is a show that could, in different hands, have felt like filler because you introduce a situation and you don't resolve it. It's one of the shortest, it is the shortest episode of the series so far. And if the interactions between Loki and Sylvie weren't as rich in character detail as they were, then this really wouldn't have felt like a lot. But I think you learn a lot about Sylvie, you learn a lot about Loki, and not just about his sexuality, about how he feels about his past, his memories. They're really doing a lot to humanize this version of Loki. And this is something else that I like, is this doesn't just feel like a riff on the trickster Loki that we know from the Avengers timeline. This is really spinning him off, this variant of Loki, into his own character, a unique version of Loki that is having his own experiences, that is reckoning with his own life in ways that even the canon version of Loki that went through Thor Ragnarok and died in Avengers Infinity War didn't go through. I like this version. I like that we're seeing this, and you know, who knows what's going to happen with this version of Loki. I don't think the TVA is going to be around, certainly not in the form that we see it now, just based on the revelations that have been going on so far. I think we're leading to some big understanding of what's actually behind everything that's probably going to spin off into the MCU. But I also don't want this Loki to just supplant the one that we lost. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do with this character and how he develops as the series goes on. So that's my look at episode 3 of Loki. What did you think? Did you wish that there was more? Did you want them to settle things up? Or do you like this shorter episode that raises the stakes and then leaves us with a how are they going to get out of this one for next week? I am really excited to see what the next episode holds. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching. Please be sure to like, share, subscribe, all the stuff that we ask you to do here on YouTube. We're not just saying it, it does help the channel grow. We're getting closer and closer to 100,000. I'm hoping maybe we can hit it by the end of the summer. So thank you for watching and doing all of those things. If you want to see even more of what I'm up to, you can check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. You can also check out later today my review of F9. I'm going to be working on that as soon as I wrap this up, and a lot of stuff throughout the rest of the week. I've got my podcast coming up, all my movies. We're going to be discussing that movie right up there, The Rock. I also have the live show coming up on Friday. Lots of great stuff still to come this week. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you very soon. Stay safe.